Welcome to Bike World Garage. This is the second instalment of us giving you the information that you need and the skills that you need to be able to confidently work on your own bike. It's cold outside, it's the winter, it's the perfect time to get those jobs done that you've maybe been putting off or that you maybe need a little bit of a helping hand with. Fluids, Dan, right?
Not them kind of fluids, mate. We're going to talk about motorbike fluids.
But these are important. These are
important. Thanks, mate.
So we're doing, what are we doing? All of the fluids in this bike today?
All the fluids. We're going to be doing the oil filter, and brake fluids and coolant.
Okay. I know that we're going to talk about the type of oil that we're going to use.
That's right.
And it is Motor X, isn't it?
Motor X, yeah. Always you need to find out what oil your bike's obviously going to run. Whether it's fully synthetic, part synthetic.
Yeah. And one thing that you're less inclined to talk about is your skills. And I know that if I don't have a Dan, I need a point of reference, which is why we use these Haynes manuals. They're perfect in terms of giving us the right information, giving us a trusted source of information, and giving you the chance to just flick back a page when you've forgotten and always go back and pick up where you might have lost.
They're very important for various reasons, torque settings,
every
grades of oil,
yeah.
settings. You know, it's always good to have a manual in front of you.
Yeah, and I guess you probably don't use them anywhere near as much as you used to, but even proper mechanics would have started out having points of reference like this.
100%.
So definitely a handy thing to have.
Yeah.
So before we get into doing any of the jobs on this bike, I guess there's an amount of preparation that you need to do before you start doing any job. So making sure you've got the right volume of oil, the right type of oil, the right filters. They've all been ordered, they've all arrived, and you haven't done what I've done in the past where you've stuck a screwdriver through the side of a filter because you can't get it off and you've ripped it, and then you realise the one that you've ordered is the wrong one, and then you're screwed.
Just a bit of pre-prep,
yeah,
ready to go, make sure you've got everything.
Dan, feel free to jump in at any stage and make me look even more stupid than I'm perfectly capable of doing on my own. But for me, this job would start with running the motor up to warm the engine oil so that it flows out quicker than if it was a cold, thick, loopy mess. Really.
Yeah, that's right. It just gets most of the oil out, basically.
Yep. Well, let's talk about the tools that we're going to use for the day then, or that you're going to use for the day.
Simple, really. Torque wrenches, always.
Yep.
I mean, in this scenario, because I'm in a trade and a manual.
Torque settings come from
settings, that's right.
Torque manual.
I'll use a vacuum bleeder. They are quite expensive, but they're fast, they're efficient.
Yep.
Or you can go the old-fashioned way and use a milk bottle.
Okay.
You know, there's various different ways of doing it.
Yep.
That's my way of doing it.
Okay, cool.
Obviously, you've got oil filter, wrenches to undo the oil filter. Again, they come in various different sizes.
So you've got all of your lubes, you've got your bike, you've got a manual, you've got all your tools. I get the feeling that I'm probably just going to end up getting in the way for a little bit now.
You scoot off, mate, and go and watch the internet.
Perfect.
And I'll crack on.
See you in a bit, mate.
What we're going to do now is basically drain the oil out of the bike. Get yourself a good oil tray. Obviously, you want to be disposing of the oil properly. Use your brain, don't go pouring it down the drain. It's quite poisonous and it's not going to do the environment very well. So on this particular bike, the Ducati 996, it's basically got a magnetic oil sump bolt. Just catches all the swarf off of things like the gearbox, clutch, etc. We'll give that a good brake cleaner off in a minute. So now we'll move on to the oil filter. Basically, on these Ducatis, they're set in quite high up into the sump. You can use, again, very different tools, you know, to get the oil filter off. This is quite just a simple device. Loosen it off, again, bit of rag, because it's all going to go over your hands. So now the oil filter's off, I like just undoing the cap, the oil filler cap. Sometimes it holds a bit of vacuum up in there. While that's draining, go and have a cup of tea for 20 minutes, half hour, let it all drain out. At this point, I'm going to crack on and do the brake fluids. So now I'm going to be changing the brake fluids and clutch fluid. Obviously, you want to take precaution when using anything to do with brake fluids, this horrible stuff. I like covering the tank up and covering the area of that you're going to be working in, whether that's just with rag, wear gloves, have even simple things like a bottle of water handy, because if that gets on your paintwork, it's very corrosive and it will eat through the bodywork or the paintwork, alley, anything like that. It's real nasty stuff. I'm going to take the cap off by undoing the screws. As you can see over time, you know, Italian paint Some are plastic, some are metal. This one's obviously metal. It can corrode. Just be careful not to get it everywhere. So now we're basically going to remove all the old brake fluid. I'm going to use my handy little vacuum tool. This is the way I like to do it. Again, there's millions of ways of doing it. I like siphoning all the old fluid out of the reservoir first. Just to make sure you're getting all the old fluid out. You're going to clean the reservoir pot. So when you pour your nice new fluid in there, you're not going to get loads of bits of chipped off old paint and old fluid in there basically. So now we've emptied the reservoir of old brake fluid. We've still got brake fluid in the brake lines, but now we're basically going to just replace the old fluid with new fluid. So we'll fill the reservoir up. Don't go too mad. You can get in a bit of bother sometimes when, if you fill that right up and the bleed nipples are quite stiff, you'll end up moving the handlebars. This will end up going everywhere. It just makes life real messy. Just make sure you've got a good ample amount in there ready to bleed. So we know we've got fresh fluid up in the reservoir. I'm going to turn my vacuum pump on and undo the bleed nipple. You must keep an eye on how much you've got up there, because you're drawing it through out of the caliper and it's bringing the new fluid down the brake lines. So now that's taken most of that out of the reservoir. We've still got some in there. We'll lock off the bleed nipple, then move on to the next caliper. Bearing in mind you've drawn most of the fluid out of that reservoir, so you'll then need to top it back up before you do this caliper. A lot of calipers, bleed nipples come with these little rubber caps. Most important to put them back on. They're just little dust caps. So now you've bled the calipers, but put the little caps back on. Give it a top up. We're going to pump the lever just to make sure the lever's nice and firm and there's no excess air bubbles in there. Another little handy tip, if you're struggling getting air out of the system, keep the lid off. If you're not going to ride the bike, let's say overnight, pop a cable tie around it so it's nice and firm, holding the lever back, and let nature do its course. Obviously air rises, so it'll just release a little bit of the air that's stuck in there. We've got a nice firm lever. Also, another thing to bear in mind, if your brake pads are quite low, don't be filling the cap right up, because when you put your new brake pads in, the system's going to be way too full of brake fluid. So if your pads are half worn, let's say, don't be filling the cap right up. We're good to put this cap back on now. Always pull the cap apart. There will be a rubber diaphragm in there. As you can see, this one's pretty mashed up and stuck in there. So we'll pull this apart, give it a nice clean up, because there will be a lot of moisture inside this, as you can see. Just basically where moisture's sat in there. Corroded the cap up quite a bit. You can replace the cap or just give it a clean out with a bit of brake cleaner, just to make sure there's no moisture in there. Another handy little tip, the screws that hold the cap on, depending on what model we got, some have plastic, just normal screw on caps, some have these screws. Give them a little bit of grease or copper slick, anything really, because they like to corrode, and it just makes life a little bit easier when you undo it next. Make sure it's seating nice and flat. Just tighten the cap back on. Don't go mad with these screws. Just give them a little nip. So now we've done the brake fluid, we're going to do the clutch fluid. Again, it's exactly the same. You'll sometimes find that the clutch fluid's a lot darker than the brake fluid. It's just basically because it gets worked so much harder than the brakes. exactly the same principle of doing the brakes. I like draining it all out. I don't know if you can see in there, but you'll see all the black old brake fluid in there. So we're going to fill up the clutch reservoir with new fluid. Then we're going to move down to the slave cylinder where the bleed nipple is and draw that new fluid through the system. So on this hydraulic system we've got obviously the same dust cover for the bleed nipple. It will bleed a lot quicker than the brakes because of the reservoir's a lot smaller, so it's better really to have another pair of hands like your wife to get to fill that up while you're bleeding the system. So I'm going to get my wife John to come in and give me a hand. I need you to bleed that, feel that reservoir while I'm bleeding it out of here, yeah?
You say when you're ready, mate. Right, that's halfway now.
Now we've replaced the fluid, we're just going to give the clutch a few pumps to get rid of any excess air bubbles. There shouldn't really be any in there because we've got a vacuum machine. We've got a nice firm pressure on the clutch. It feels like a clutch. And that is your clutch bled. Again, put the cap back on it, same principle, make sure you clean the cap so there's no moisture in there. Bleeding the rear brake, it's exactly the same as obviously doing the front brake. On particular models, like this Ducati, some Aprilia models, if you look at the master cylinder, they're at a bit of a funny angle. Now, they don't bleed the best. They can become a bit of a pain to bleed. Sometimes the fluid boils really quickly because they're so close to like the exhaust system, the engine, etc. So it's a good idea to keep on top of bleeding, i.e. your rear brake. If you're suffering with really a bit of a rubbish rear brake, you can boost the performance by changing, let's say, the compound of your brake pads to like a double H or a sintered pad. Will give you a stronger pad, and again that's the same principle on the front. So guys, safety first. You've been messing around with your brakes, we know everything's bled, just don't go down the road like Valentino Rossi, give them a chance to bed in. So another good little tip really when draining your oil out, we know that this particular bike, the sump bolt, is quite right underneath the bike basically. A lot of bikes, sump bolts are in different places. Just a little tip, make sure you've got maybe someone standing on the other side. Just give the bike a couple of little shakes side to side just to make sure you're getting all the little bits of oil out. You'll never get all the oil out because you've got oil coolers. When you strip an engine, that's when you really get all the oil out. Sump bolt, always make sure you replace the washer with a new crush washer, which we've done here. Going to insert the sump bolt. Sump bolt's in, we're now going to torque this. The torque setting on this particular bike is 31, 32 Newton meters. Always make sure you look in your Haynes manual for the correct torque setting. That sump bolt is nicely torqued. We're going to move on to the oil filter. This oil filter is basically, you need to pre-fill this oil filter because it's obviously sitting at an upright position. So you want to pre-fill that with oil, new oil. Make sure you get a bit of a smear of oil around the O-ring so that doesn't snag when you're tying it up. Tighten the oil filter to roughly 11 to 13 Newton meters. Make sure you look in your manual and see what Pacific oil your bike's meant to use. This bike holds roughly around about 4 litres with an oil filter. I'm going to put in about 3.8. We pulled the bike to a level surface and we'll check as a guide through the window to see what the oil level is saying. Pop the cap back on. Now I'm not going to run this bike up at this precise moment because I want to drop the coolant out of it. Obviously if you're not doing a coolant change, now's the time to run it up, get it nice and hot, and you want it to be roughly around about at this top line. Make sure it's not too full up. You'll end up pumping it through the airbox and all that kind of stuff, making unnecessary mess. Now we're going to drain the coolant system. Now the drain bolt on this bike is on the water pump. So now we're happy that all the coolant's all drained. Just give the surfaces a bit of a wipe. Insert the drain bung. Again, make sure you know the torque settings for these. Going into alleys so they're not usually tight. A lot of coolants now are pre-mixed. You can get neat coolant. Quite important to use distilled water if you're going to mix your coolant. But a lot of them now come already mixed. So we're just pouring the coolant into the bottle here, into the filler. Just take your time with it. You don't want to be putting loads of coolant all over your front tyre, all that kind of stuff. Just let it do its course and don't force it in there. So now we've filled up the coolant system, pop the cap back on. We're now going to run the bike up and get it nice and hot, let the fans kick in 2 or 3 times, and then we're going to let it sit until it's cooled right down before you take that cap off, because there will be pressure there. Then we're going to recheck the coolant level, and while we're doing that we can check the oil level, because the oil level will be hot as well. We've done the oil, we've done the coolant, we've done all the fluids basically in this bike. So we're going to recheck all the levels. Just hold the bike off the side stand, make sure it's in an upright position, and you're just looking for slightly under, slightly over that top level.
So I've swooped in at the end to steal half the glory, Dan. Nicely done. So what's next, Daniel?
There's plenty of stuff to do, mate. I'll find something. I hope you've enjoyed this episode. Look forward to the next one.